أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المصطفى محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. In our last lesson we finished the story of Salman, how he entered Islam, rahmatullah alayh, and we said one of the main lessons we derive from that story is the importance of seeking the truth and exerting effort in order to find the truth. Because Salman, rahmatullah alayh, exerted a lot of effort and made a lot of sacrifices and went through a good amount of hardships in order to do what? In order to find Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and also in order to maintain his belief, in the truth. This led us to what? To looking at the stances of the people regarding seeking the truth. We said people take different stances regarding this issue. Some people choose not to search for the truth, meaning not to search for the right religion or the right sect. They tell you that we'll leave it until we die. Once we die, we'll find out which religion was the right religion, which sect was the right sect. They don't exert effort in order to find the truth. We said this is wrong. This is wrong. Why? Well, number one, the religion of truth, Islam, tells you have to seek the truth. Number two, even if you don't believe in a religion, your intellect tells you that you have to seek the truth. You have to seek it. We presented a detailed, logical proof that obligates us to actually seek the truth, to try to find out which religion is the right religion and which sect is the right sect. That logical proof depends on what? Depends on a principle, on a logical principle, which tells you that when there is a significant chance you will be afflicted with harm, you must repel that harm. When there's a significant chance that you will be afflicted with a significant amount of harm, you have to repel it, you have to push it away. Now, knowing that, certain religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam say there is a hereafter, there is something called hellfire and something called heaven, and that the believer who does good deeds will enter heaven, whereas the disbeliever who does bad deeds will enter hellfire. Since these religions say so, then even if a person doesn't believe in a religion, he cannot negate the possibility of this being true. There is a possibility, there is a chance that there is a hereafter. For us, Muslims, Shia Muslims, we know there's a hereafter. We have certainty in it because we have clear, concrete proofs and evidence confirming that issue. But suppose that someone doesn't believe in the truth or doesn't have a religion. Even the person who doesn't have a religion, he cannot negate the possibility of the presence of a hereafter. Since there is a possibility that the hereafter exists, and there is something called heaven, there is something called hell, and that the believers who do good deeds will enter heaven, and the disbelievers who do bad deeds will enter hellfire, here his intellect will obligate him, the intellect of the human being will obligate him to search for the truth. So he may be what? Safe from that possible harm. Or say, he may be safe from the possible punishment that exists in the hereafter. So people do what? They take different stances regarding seeking the truth. That's one stance. The stance of laziness, I like to call it, right? The stance of refraining from seeking the truth, trying to find it. Then again, you have people who actually do seek the truth. They try to find it, but they fall into mistakes. They fall into mistakes. One mistake that people fall into is the mistake of hastening. They rush. So you'll have a person who wants to find the truth, but he rushes as he is, reading, as he is reading different books regarding beliefs. And because he rushes, he either misunderstands, he misunderstands the specific text that he's reading, or the least we can say is he doesn't understand it. He does not understand it. Sometimes you don't understand a specific text, and you know that you haven't understood it. Sometimes something worse happens. What happens? You think that you've understood the text, when in reality, you've misunderstood it. This is more dangerous because when you misunderstand a particular text, when you misunderstand, for example, a Quranic verse or a narration or a specific text in a belief book, in a beliefs book, what happens here is you're going to come to conclusions that are based on what? On the misunderstanding. So those conclusions will be what? Will be wrong conclusions. Hence, it's very important when a person is seeking the truth, when a person is reading, for example, books of beliefs, it's very important that he takes his time and he does not rush. It's very important that he does not rush in, giving out judgments unless he's sure that what? He's sure that the judgment he's giving is correct. How will he be sure that the judgment he's giving is correct? When he takes his time. When he takes his time to read, think about what he's reading, analyze the proofs and the evidence that support a particular belief, then at that point he'll be able to um, give a judgment and to be sure that the judgment is what is correct. So one of the fatal mistakes that people fall into when they're trying to uh, find out the truth, when they're trying to, read about, or when they actually read about beliefs, is the mistake of hastening. They rush. They don't give themselves time or enough time to understand a specific text or understand a specific Quranic verse or a specific narration. This is a very important issue. When we come to the traditions of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wassalam, Ahlul Bayt tell us that we should take our time, that hastening in general, hastening is not good. It comes from the devil, meaning the devil commands you to rush. Whereas Allah Azza wa Jal commands you to do what? To take your time. Yes, there are certain cases where someone has to rush, but in general, rushing is not a good thing. Taking your time in performing your tasks, in acquiring knowledge, for example, in seeking the truth, taking your time, right? In analyzing, for example, certain proofs supporting beliefs, that is good. Let me share a few traditions with you today about the importance of taking your time and the danger of rushing. When we go to the book Mizan al-Hikmah, we have a tradition by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, which says, إنما أهلك الناس العجلة. The Prophet says the one thing that led people to doom is hastening. rushing. وَلَوْ أَنَّ النَّاسَ تَثَبَّتُوا لَمْ يَهْلَكْ أَحَدٌ. Then the Prophet said, if the people actually gave themselves time to do what? To verify certain issues, no one would have been doomed. No one would have been doomed. Let me give you an example, or actually multiple examples, regarding what? Regarding this narration. This is a very deep tradition that pertains to beliefs and also pertains to actions. For example, sometimes people fabricate a particular lie about someone else. They say, for example, did you hear what happened today? What happened? They tell you, Fulan did so and so for the following reason. Now, they're fabricating a lie. You hear that lie, right? You hear it. You know Fulan. You know he's a good person. He has good akhlaq. And this word seems quite strange because based on your knowledge of Fulan, he doesn't do such things. Here you have two options. Option one is to do what? Is to accept what the people are saying and to believe in it. By doing that, you might be accepting a lie. You might be creating a particular belief, a belief pertaining to that person, that's based on what? Based on a rumor, based on a lie, on a false accusation. The second option is to do what? Is to take your time, not to rush, and to verify. To verify if what has been said is actually true. Or the second option, or the third option, is to ignore that word and to say what? I know this person. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, and I will not accept what the people are saying about him. Long story short, what I mean to say is that sometimes people will rush in accepting whatever is said about others without actually verifying if these words are, correct or not. And if they are correct, if Fulan actually did what he did, why did he do it? Was he excused or not? So people sometimes rush and accept these rumors, these false accusations, and as a result, they fall into sin because they rushed. Whereas, if people took their time, they didn't rush, and they said, you know what, we're not going to believe in this until we are certain that this actually happened. If they took that stance, they would be well off. They would be much safer. They would be on the safe side. Because what? Because they're taking their time. They're not rushing. When you take your time, you're able to think. You're giving yourself the chance to think and to make the right decision. When a person rushes, many times he'll fall into what? Into the wrong decision, as in he'll take the wrong decision. But when he takes his time, he's closer to doing what? To taking the right decision. A second example pertaining to this hadith, this deep hadith which is connected to our beliefs and our practices, is the example of a person reading about beliefs. He's reading about beliefs, he's, reading certain texts written by our scholars about our usul al-din, the roots of our religion, and the proofs that support those roots of religion. And he goes through certain proofs quickly, doesn't give himself enough time to actually ponder on what's being said. So he understands a particular message from what's written, but the message is wrong. The message he understood is wrong. Why? Because he hastened. He was hasty. He did not give himself enough time to understand the proof. So now what happens? He builds a belief based on his misunderstanding and starts assuming that this belief is true. God knows where that belief might take him later on. It might lead him to deviation, major forms of deviation. Whereas if he goes step by step and reads the books of beliefs written by our scholars, for example, he reads those books, and when he passes through a text that he doesn't understand, he asks about it. He goes to the people of knowledge, to the people of experience in that field, such as well-versed Hausa students or scholars, and asks them, what does this mean? When he does that, he'll be closer to guidance, farther away from misguidance. He'll be closer to salvation, farther away from doom or deviation. So, taking your time in verifying what you're reading, verifying the proofs and the evidence that you're reading, especially concerning beliefs, is really, really important. Let's repeat the hadith. The Prophet says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إِنَّمَا أَهْلَكَ النَّاسِ الْعَجَلَةِ. The one thing that led humans to doom is hastening. وَلَوْ أَنَّ النَّاسَ تَثَبَّتُوا لَمْ يَهْلَكْ أَحَدٌ. If people verified what they were, for example, reading, or they verified what they heard, or they verified what they saw. In general, he's saying if the people take their time and they verify the issue that they are tackling, no one would have been doomed. This is one hadith. Another hadith in Mizan al-Hikmah by Imam Ali salawatullah wa salamu alayh says the following. The Imam says, أصاب متأن أو كاد أخطأ مستعجل أو كاد. What a concise yet deep tradition. The Imam says what? First he talks about the person who takes his time. He says the person who takes his time will take the right decision or will reach the goal that he's aiming for, or he will be close to, he'll be very close to reaching the right decision or reaching the goal. Whereas then he talks about the person who is hasty. As he says, أخطأ مستعجل أو كاد. He says, as for the one who's hasty, the one who rushes, he falls into error. He makes mistakes. Or he gets really close to falling into mistakes or error. So what do you understand from the hadith? The hadith of Imam Ali salawatullah alayh? You understand that taking your time in learning, for example, beliefs, or taking your time in taking important decisions is really important. It leads you, when you're taking your time, that leads you to what? To salvation. It keeps you safe. Whereas rushing brings you closer to what? To deviation, or brings you closer to doom, or brings you closer to making mistakes. This issue of taking your time doesn't only pertain to Um, it doesn't only pertain to usul al-din, the roots of religion. It pertains to any part of Islam, especially historical events, and especially events pertaining to the tragedy of Karbala. I'll give you an example. See, when people listen to the masa'ib, to the tragedies that befell Imam al-Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam in Karbala, or say the tragedies that befell Sayyidah Zahra, salawatullah wa salamu alayha, when, for example, her house was attacked and Sayyidah Zahra was beaten and crushed between the door and the wall, and Muhsin alayhi salam was miscarried. When people hear these events, some people rush at what? At negating certain events. They rush. Why? Because they don't understand how could something like this happen, or why would it happen. Because they fail to understand how it could have happened or why it happened, directly they jump to the conclusion that this event did not happen. That's what? That's a form of rushing. That's a form of rushing. And the Imam says what? أخطأ مستعجل أو كاد. Instead of rushing, take your time. Be fair with your own self. Give yourself some time and ponder upon what you're hearing. Ask the scholars about it. Maybe you will be convinced later on that this actually happened. The event you were about to negate actually took place. What I mean to say is, if people take their time and they don't rush, possibly their stance regarding a specific event pertaining to Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wassalam, or a specific detail regarding their tragedies, possibly their stance will change. Previously, he was on the brink of negating that event or that detail. But after giving himself some time, pondering and asking the people of experience, his opinion might change. He might become certain that this actually happened. This is a result of what? Of not rushing. Now let me give you the example. Many examples can be given, of course, but I'll give you one specific example regarding the number of enemies Imam al-Hussain salamullah alayhi faced in Karbala. We hear in the traditions of Ahlul Bayt that 30,000 people attended Karbala to fight Abu Abdullah al-Hussain salamullah alayhi. This has been mentioned by Imam al-Hasan and by Imam al-Sajjad salawatullah alayhima, which means at least 30,000 troops attended Karbala to fight the Imam. At least. Here a question comes to mind. Why would Yazid and Ibn Ziyad la'anahum Allah send 30,000 troops to fight Imam al-Hussain when the Imam had about 100 people with him? The Hussaini army, the whole Hussaini army, consisted of about 100 people, give or take. This question led certain people to say that there wasn't such an enormous amount of Yazidi troops in Karbala. They said, you know, Azat reciters, or you scholars or speakers, you exaggerate. You fabricate lies on the minbar, which is not the case. We did not fabricate that detail pertaining to Karbala. Imam al-Sajjad mentioned it. Imam al-Hasan mentioned it. Alayhim as-salatu wassalam. If that person or those people who have this view gives himself, or they give themselves time to actually ponder upon this issue, they'll realize that it makes complete sense for Yazid and Ibn Ziyad to send 30,000 troops to fight Imam al-Hussain and his army in Karbala, although his army consisted of only about 100 people. In the past few weeks, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, I wrote 5 posts explaining why they would do so. 5 posts in detail, explaining why Yazid and Ibn Ziyad would send 30,000 people to Karbala. I'll summarize the posts for you, and if you want, you can read them. I've sent them to most of you, if not all of you, through WhatsApp. You can also find them on my Facebook page. 4 reasons. Number 1, Yazid and Ibn Ziyad knew that Imam Hussain had a unique status amongst the Muslims. No one possessed the status of Abu Abdullah. And so, there was a high chance that thousands of people would join the army of Imam al-Hussein. This is one reason. Number 2, Yazid and Ibn Ziyad wanted to terrorize the Muslims. See, when they send Imam al-Hussein 30,000 people to fight him, they're sending an implicit message, telling people that anyone who dares to do like al-Hussein bin Ali alayhi salam will be faced by a humongous army, for example, and will be punished. He will be killed. That's the second reason. The third reason is they wanted to quickly put an end to the uprising of Imam al-Hussein before it gets bigger. So they send him a humongous amount of troops to ensure that they actually kill him. Salawatullah alayhi. Number 4, they knew that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had certain troops in his army that were unbelievable fighters. Troops that truly needed a whole army to be taken down. And even if they sent an army, it was still possible that these troops would be victorious over the army. Such as who? Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, Ali al-Akbar, alayhim as-salatu was-salam, the fighters of Banu Hashim, and of course, last but not least, the greatest fighter, the inheritor of Ali ibn Abi Talib, al-Hussein ibn Ali, salawatullah alayhi. So long story short, when we are hearing the details of Karbala, or when we're reading about religion, when we're reading beliefs, when we read Quran, etc., and we go through something that we think does not make sense, we shouldn't rush at making judgments. Rather, we should take our time, think about what we're reading, contact the people of experience, ask, and after you go through that process, you're able to do what? You'll be able to make the right judgment. All right. So this is one mistake that people fall into. When they do what? When they try to seek the truth. When they seek the truth. Another mistake that people fall into when they're seeking the truth is reading certain books that are higher than their level of understanding. You see, there are a lot of books of beliefs out there. If we only look at the books of beliefs written by Shia scholars, you'd find, tens, if not hundreds of books. Plenty of books to read. But these books that are written by fallible authors, these books are at different levels. What I mean by this is, some books are very simple, easy to understand, and some books are quite difficult to understand, quite difficult. In order to understand these books, you yourself need to be a scholar, or uh, you know, um, someone who's well versed in that field, in the field of beliefs or the field of philosophy, and you need to have acquired an amount of prerequisites to understand that book, which means that the scholar himself wrote the book in a way he knew that those who will understand him have to be scholars or people similar to scholars, meaning people who are well versed in that specific field. I recall here, before I continue, a word that Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam said to Mufaddal, sorry, not to Mufaddal, to Jabir ibn Hayyan. Jabir ibn Hayyan, the chemist, father of chemistry, rahimahullah. Jabir ibn Hayyan had writings that were difficult to understand. The Imam told him what? He told him, you have to simplify your writings. He had written, books or letters or articles regarding chemistry. The Imam told him, you have to simplify those writings, Ya Jabir, because they're so hard, only people like you can understand them, meaning only scholars, only chemists can understand them. And if someone's a chemist, he won't he won't be in need of seeking what you're teaching him, because he's a chemist. He's as experienced as you are in that field. So, what the Imam meant to say, alayhi salam, is that if you want to benefit a general public, if you want to benefit the average human being with these writings, you have to simplify them. You have to simplify your writings. So, when we come to the books of beliefs, some books are quite easy to understand. Quite easy. You don't need much prerequisites to understand them. Whereas, some books are very hard, very difficult. The author has written them in a way where only those who have a good amount of prerequisites, such as a good amount of Arabic knowledge, a good amount of Islamic knowledge, only a person who has a good amount of prerequisites can actually understand that book. For example, the book Tajrid al-I'tiqad, written by Sheikh Nassereddine al-Tusi, rahmatullah alayh. Nassereddine al-Tusi. Tajrid al-I'tiqad has two main parts. The first part of Tajrid al-I'tiqad is philosophical. It pertains to philosophy. And the second part pertains to beliefs. So, Sheikh Nassereddine al-Tusi starts with philosophy and then enters what? Enters the field of beliefs. So he speaks about our beliefs. Now, that book, in that book, Sheikh Nassereddine al-Tusi presents proofs supporting our beliefs. But, the way he writes the text of Tajrid al-I'tiqad and the way he presents the proofs of Tajrid al-I'tiqad is a very complicated or complex way, such that for every segment, for every few words you read, you have to pause and you have to actually ponder on what he's saying in order to decode the statement of Sheikh Nassereddine al-Tusi. You have to decode it. So, for example, he'll say three words, as an example, three words. Now, when you look at these three words, there are three words in total, but the content of the three words might be, let's say, a whole paragraph or a whole page. What I mean to say is that his words are very condensed. You need to decode his words. And when you decode his words, you realize that they're very rich in content. Very rich. Thus, one of our great maraja, one of our greatest maraja, called Allama al-Hilli, rahmatullah alayh, he took a step forward and he explained Tajreed al-I'tiqad. This is how deep Tajreed al-I'tiqad is. It needs someone like Allama al-Hilli to come forward and explain it. So, if a person who has zero knowledge regarding beliefs or has minimal knowledge regarding beliefs comes forward and starts with Tajreed al-I'tiqad, he will be making a grave mistake. A grave mistake, a fatal mistake. Because either he won't understand a thing, which means he'll be wasting his time when he's reading Tajreed al-I'tiqad from day one, or what's more dangerous is he'll misunderstand what Sheikh Nassereddine Tusi is saying. He'll read, he'll misunderstand what he's saying, and then he'll do what? He'll come out with conclusions based on his misunderstandings. And so, he might end up deviating. So we realize that choosing the right book to read when you're seeking the truth is very important. Choosing the book that pertains to your level of knowledge is really important. Again, I repeat, not all belief books are like this. Some are quite easy to understand. Some are not. Some require a lot of prerequisites, some don't. You see, the scholar himself sometimes chooses his audience. How does he choose his audience? He chooses his audience. By audience, I mean the people who are going to read this book and benefit from it, through complicating his words or simplifying them. He's the one who chooses. Sometimes the author doesn't want this book to be read by the average human being. He wants scholars to read it only and benefit from it. Or he wants people who are, close to being scholars to read it and benefit from it. Whereas, no, sometimes he writes the book with the intention of benefiting everyone, or the average layman through that book. We've mentioned before, if you remember, that Sheikh Muhammad Jawad Mughniya rahmatullah alayh was known for this. Sheikh Muhammad Jawad Mughniya and also Sheikh Muhammad Rida al-Mudaffar rahmatullah alayhima. These two scholars were known for simplifying their words. They were scholars. They had a lot of knowledge. But they wrote books in simple terms. Simple terms. So they can what? So they can benefit as much people as possible through those books. For example, Sheikh Muhammad Jawad Mughni wrote Fiqh al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, the jurisprudence of Imam al-Sadiq, which is a 6-volume book speaking about Shia jurisprudence, mentioning the main verdicts regarding all of the jurisprudential topics, whether we're talking about purity, prayer, inheritance, marriage, divorce, Islamic punishments, etc. It's a very important book. What's beautiful about it is what? The average layman can pick it up and actually understand what Sheikh Mughniya is saying, rahimahullah. Whereas there are several jurisprudential books that cannot be understood by the average layman. Because the scholar who wrote that book, he wrote it in a way only another scholar or only a Hausa student can actually understand what he's saying. So what I mean to say is that when he wrote that book, he intended to benefit who? The scholar and the Hausa student. Now there's a reason for that intention. There's a reason. It's similar to, certain books written in any academic field by top-notch scholars of that field, right? They might not write it for the average layman. They write the book for scholars like them or students who are in that field. So when we come to beliefs, it's very important to do what? To understand uh, what level you're in. As in, what is the level of your knowledge regarding beliefs? Are you a beginner? Or are you an expert? Or are you in between? Depending on your level of understanding and your level of knowledge, you'll be able to do what? When you understand your level, you'll be able to choose the right book. For example, if someone doesn't know much about Shia Islam, Shia beliefs, he's Shia, or he's not a Shia, but he wants to learn about, Shia beliefs. Where does he start? With what book does he start? Obviously, he doesn't start with Tajrid al-I'tiqad. Keep that aside. That's for Hausa students. Okay, so in fact, it's not only for Hausa students, it's for Hausa students who have finished a good amount of Hausa courses. Hausa students who have, for example, entered the second stage called Sutuh. It's not even for Hausa students who have just begun Hausa. Okay, so you want to start reading about Shia Islam, you don't have much knowledge about Shia beliefs. What book do you choose? Well, you can choose Al-I'tiqadat for Sheikh al-Saduq rahmatullah alayh, or Aqaid al-Imamiyya for Sheikh Mohammed Rida al-Muzaffar. This is the same scholar we mentioned earlier. We said he was known to do what? To write books in simple terms, using simple terms. So he's able to convey the message and to give you the piece of information he wants to give you. But in what? Using simple terms. Al-I'tiqadat for Sheikh al-Saduq or Aqaid al-Imamiyya for Sheikh Muzaffar rahmatullah alayhima. These two books basically display the Shia beliefs. If you're looking for proofs and evidence supporting our beliefs, those aren't the books that you want to read. You need to go to books that are deeper than those books. Because Sheikh al-Saduq and Sheikh al-Muzaffar, when they wrote those books, they were basically displaying our beliefs. They want to tell the people, this is what we believe in. Case closed. Whereas, if you have a good amount of knowledge, you know the Shia beliefs, but now you want to know the proofs. Why do we believe in the existence of Allah Ta'ala? Why do we believe in Allah's oneness? Why do we believe in the Prophet of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, etc.? Here you go to level 2. You go to another level. You go to the books that are deeper than the books we mentioned and that also present proofs. Like, we've mentioned these books before, but I'll mention them again because it's good to remind ourselves of these books. Like, for example, دروس في العقيدة الإسلامية for الشيخ مصباح اليزدي رحمة الله عليه. This one is easy to understand. Easy. Not as easy as عقائد الإمامية, but it's not very difficult. If you have, a good amount of knowledge regarding Arabic vocabulary, then you should be able to understand this book. دروس في العقيدة الإسلامية. On top of that, you will need an amount of knowledge regarding beliefs before you go into this book. So, دروس في العقيدة الإسلامية for Sheikh Misbah al-Yazdi. That's one book you can read. You also have أصول العقيدة for Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim قدس سره, which you mentioned last week. You also have the first volume of Manhaj al-Salihin for Sheikh Wahid al-Khurasani. All of these books are written in a simplified manner, but they also present a good amount of proof supporting our beliefs. If you want to go deeper than that, then you can read the book حق اليقين for Sayyid Abdullah Shubbar rahmatullah alayh. That is a masterpiece. If you want to go deeper than that, you can read Al-Bab al-Hadi Ashar. Here we're going to books that are quite hard to understand. You actually need a teacher. How's a teacher to explain these books for you? Al-Bab al-Hadi Ashar for Allam al-Hilli. If you want to go deeper, then you go to, for example, Tajrid al-A'tiqad for Sheikh Nassereddine al-Tusi rahmatullah alayh. Also, a book that is very beneficial and written in a simplified manner, which has rich content, is Al-Ilahiyat for Sheikh Ja'far al-Subhani. This one is a detailed book. Okay, it has a lot of details regarding our beliefs, but again, it's written in a simplified manner. The terms are simple. So when you're reading them, you don't scratch your head asking yourself, what does he mean by this? Right? They're simple terms. But the amount of knowledge he gives you is abundant. He gives you a lot of knowledge through those writings in Al-Ilahiyat. This issue, brothers and sisters, unfortunately is a mistake that some of our youth fall into. When they're trying to enhance their knowledge regarding beliefs, they choose the wrong books. They go to books that they can't understand. I know it seems nice, or it seems, quite interesting to pick up a book written by a huge philosopher and to come and read it. It seems nice, but it's quite dangerous if you're reading that book without having enough knowledge to understand it. It's quite dangerous. Why? Because you might misunderstand what the author is saying, thinking you've understood him, and then you build beliefs based on your misunderstanding. It's not a game. It's not a game. It is not a game whatsoever. Because that misunderstanding, God forbid, might lead a person to deviation for the rest of his life. Hence, I wanted to stress on this point tonight, because I do see sometimes certain youth or adults falling into this grave mistake. جيد. Now, one might say that what does this have to do with the biography of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Well, again, this is a lesson that we learn from what? From Salman. What led us to speaking about this is the lesson we learn from Salman's Islam, rahmatullah ta'ala alayh. Remember that although these classes revolve around but the biography of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That does not mean that we're not going to mention, certain lessons that we can derive from his biography or the biography of Ahlul Bayt or the companions, the noble companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because at the end of the day, the point isn't to just learn what happened when Rasulullah was alive in this world. The point behind these classes is to learn what happened and to derive lessons from what happened in his blessed life, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Inshallah, next week, if we're still alive, we'll mention further details regarding what happened when Rasulullah migrated to Medina. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala al-Mustafa Muhammadin wa alihi al-Tahirin. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم يا كريم.